All right, folks, let's get started here with chapter three. We'll start with the first section here. So here are the subtopics for the entire chapter, and again, we're just going to go section by section. So our first section here is global competition. So again, put these in your notes. If you can answer this question, you're in great shape. By the mid 17th century, it was apparent that North American colonies could generate tremendous wealth. England moved to seize control of Atlantic trade, consolidate its hold over the continent's eastern coast, and regulate its empire to a greater degree. England acted according to the theory of mercantilism, in which the government regulated economic activity to promote national power by encouraging manufacturing and commerce through special bounties, monopolies, and other measures, primarily to manipulate trade to make sure that more gold and silver entered the country than left it. The export of goods, which generated revenue from abroad, should exceed imports, which required paying foreigners for their products. The colony's role was to serve the interests of the mother country by producing raw materials and importing manufactured goods from home. Commerce, not territorial plunder, was the foundation of empire. The first Navigation Act, passed in 1651 under Cromwell, was intended to wrest control over world trade from the Dutch. It required that enumerated goods, the most valuable that were produced in the colonies, such as tobacco and sugar, first had to be shipped to and traded in English ships and ports, and that most European goods shipped to the colonies had to be shipped through England. This enabled the government to collect revenues and allowed English merchants, manufacturers, shipbuilders, and sailors to benefit from trade. American colonists were to benefit as well because their ships were considered English, and in New England, the act stimulated its considerable shipbuilding industry. With the restoration of the English monarchy in 1660 under Charles II, England expanded its colonial reach. It chartered new trading ventures such as the Royal African Company, which was given a monopoly on the slave trade, and soon doubled the number of English colonies in North America. The English seized New Netherland in 1664 as part of an Anglo-Dutch war that also resulted in the conquest of Dutch trading posts in Africa. England transformed the minor military post of New Netherland into an important imperial seaport and military base for operations against the French. Charles II granted governing power over the newly acquired territory to his younger brother, James, Duke of York. The colony's name was changed from New Netherland to New York with this transfer. English rule over New York expanded and constricted freedom for certain groups. The English promised to continue religious toleration and respect property holders, but they eliminated some rights for married women and practices that benefited female colonists. The English also discriminated against free blacks who had previously enjoyed all the rights of other freemen. This period also saw the growth of a landed elite whose intermarried and well-connected families benefited from immense land grants authorized by the Duke of York and his governors. By 1700, 5 New York families owned nearly 2 million acres of land. For a time, English rule also strengthened the Haudenosaunee League in upstate New York. In the mid-1670s, New York's governor, Sir Edmund Andros, formed an alliance with the Haudenosaunee known as the Covenant Chain. This alliance expanded English and Haudenosaunee power in the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley regions at the expense of the French and their Indian allies. However, beginning in the 1680s, these Indians pushed the Haudenosaunee back to the east. By the end of the century, the Haudenosaunee carefully navigated a policy of neutrality, hoping to play Europeans against one another while continuing to profit from the fur trade. At the same time, many English colonists began to complain that they were being denied their English liberties, particularly the right to consent to taxation. The Dutch in New Netherland had not had a representative assembly, and English rule also began without one. In 1683, the Duke of York agreed to call an elected assembly, which soon drafted a Charter of Liberties and Privileges, affirming traditional English religious and political rights. In the 1660s, English proprietors who were awarded the right to establish a colony north of Florida in order to check Spanish expansion founded Carolina. Initially, the sons of wealthy plantation owners in Barbados, Carolina colonists traded with local Indians, employed them in raids against the Spanish, and also raided Indian communities for a burgeoning trade in enslaved Indians. But in 1750, Yamasee and Creek Indians, alarmed by their trading debts and English slave traders' raids into their territories, mounted the Yamasee Uprising. The uprising was crushed, resulting in their enslavement or expulsion into Spanish Florida. Slavery was fundamental to Carolina and made it the most hierarchical society, and, once rice plantation agriculture developed, it became the wealthiest of England's North American colonies. The fundamental constitutions of Carolina were issued in 1669 to establish a feudal society with a system of hereditary nobility, serfs, and enslaved people in the colony. However, to attract settlers, an elected assembly, religious toleration, and a headright system were also established. Feudalism was never actually established in Carolina, but slavery flourished as a hierarchical system. Codes were instituted to protect slaveholders' rights, and enslaved people were counted in determining how much property a colonist received. Thus, massive, concentrated landholdings developed. The early economy, however, centered on cattle and Indian trade rather than agriculture. The later emergence of rice as a cash crop caused the colony to become the wealthiest in the British holdings and made Carolina the center of mainland slavery. The last English colony established in the 1600s was Pennsylvania. Its proprietor, William Penn, an advocate of religious toleration and spiritual freedom, intended the colony as a space for social harmony between Indians and migrants escaping religious persecution in Europe. A devout member of the Society of Friends, or Quakers, Penn encouraged Quaker settlement and helped frame the colony's liberal government, which established religious liberty and an elected assembly with broad suffrage. Penn helped a group of English Quakers acquire half the territory that would become New Jersey, and in 1677 he played a central role in the development of Pennsylvania's government, the West Jersey Concessions. It was the most liberal government of the era. Penn envisioned his colony as a holy experiment to be governed on Quaker principles, including the equality of all persons, including women, blacks, and Indians, under God and the primacy of individual conscience. Penn and the colony's Quakers treated the Indians with special consideration, making peace with them. Quakers were pacifists and did not have militias, and taking pains to pay all Indian land claims. Above all, Penn emphasized religious freedom, which was ensured in 1682 in the colony's Charter of Liberty, though Jews were barred from office due to an oath requiring belief in the divinity of Jesus Christ. Furthermore, Quakers upheld strict moral codes against drunkenness, swearing, and adultery, placing emphasis on a virtuous rather than religiously uniform citizenry. Penn formed an assembly elected by male taxpayers and freemen, either free immigrants with 100 acres of land or former indentured servants with 50 acres, thus giving the vote to a majority of the colony's men. Penn also owned all the land and sold it to settlers at low prices to encourage a broad distribution of landed wealth and social equality. Pennsylvania's freedom attracted migrants from all over Europe. This made the colony prosperous, but it also increased tensions with the Indians, as whites who were not Quakers pushed into Indian territory. It also fostered the growth of African slavery in southern colonies as more indentured servants chose to migrate to Pennsylvania rather than Virginia or Maryland. So that's the end of our first